Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Q&As with me. And I am absolutely thrilled to be joined this morning with Charlotte. Good morning, Charlotte.
Morning.
Charlotte has a wonderful name, which we'll find out more about later on, which is the Stable Manager. And Charlotte's really passionate about this idea of support and why support's really important with people and teams in sport and particularly in horse riding as well. So Charlotte, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that means that you've come on to have a chat with me about this topic today.
Well, I suppose first off is that I'm old and knackered now, but I was once a sports person. I was a rower at a pretty high level back in my 20s. I had to retire, unfortunately, because I hurt my back quite badly. At that time, I didn't know that it was the start of something that was to come back and bug me, probably for the rest of my life. But I'm also a teacher, and I studied at university, biology, veterinary science, and so I now teach biology in a school, hopefully bringing on all the new vets and doctors for the future, and don't we need those now? And as a sort of sideline, really, I coach riding because that's what I love. I've always been involved with horses all my life, and actually I really love coaching. And there's that bizarre thing about horses that they can foster development and progression in a really amazing sport. I mean, a truly equal sport, which offers parity for both men and women, which is very unusual in sport, certainly at a professional level nowadays. But also, horses are such amazing, they look after us. They reflect back exactly what we're like. So if you're open to what they are telling you, you can get a very good self-reflection of how you are. And for some people, that's really quite liberating and extremely helpful, particularly if their mental health is not as good as it could be. So, yeah.
Wow, amazing. Well, and tell us a little bit about your name, the Stable Manager, then. How did that come about?
Well, I've had some really interesting things because obviously my kit has the Stable Manager embroidered on it. So I've had people coming up to me at shows saying, you know, can you point me the way to the stable block and all that sort of stuff. But actually the reason I'm the Stable Manager, and the joke is that because I've got this arthritis, I am literally physically pretty unstable. So the Stable Manager was always just a bit of a joke to say that I'm really not very stable at all.
I do love that, but it works beautifully, and certainly in we met during the Wobbleberry Challenge when it first came about, and the way I've seen you support people over the years, then actually you've clearly got stability in your instability as well, and people, so it's great. Okay. So this topic then of, you know, how we need to support each other is really, really key at the moment, because with everything going on and actually even not necessarily at the moment, you know, something that has been really, really close to my heart since, you know, a few years ago when, I don't know if you've seen, but Jake Tarrant and I came up with the concept of Buddy Don't Bully, Little Bentley Eventing's Jake. And he's one of my sponsored riders, and we've been kind of pushing this concept of help each other, support each other, we'll all rise up, so that all ships rise on a rising tide. Rather than this bitching, backstabbing, horrible, belittling, toxic, horrible, nasty viciousness that does exist in life everywhere, but is particularly prevalent in sport and particularly prevalent in yards, stables, you know, these kind of environments, for lots of reasons. And at the moment is something really is affecting lots of people in lots of ways. So tell us a little bit more about your kind of background with it, or any stories that you've got that bring it to your heart as well.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is that in my mind, there are really two sorts of support. Support for sport. So as I touched on earlier, horses offer us an opportunity to achieve in sport, but they also offer us an amazing opportunity to relax, to reground ourselves, to get away from the rush of you know, whatever your job is, whatever we do. But I think that the other thing is that they themselves are, as I mentioned earlier, I think, they're more about reflecting what we're like. It's very difficult and takes quite a lot of skill and practice to form a team with a horse. So our Olympic riders or our professionals who are performing at a very high level are literally forming a team with that horse in order to be able to perform at even any level, really. We all know what it's like if you get on a horse and it's not being particularly cooperative. Horses are, sentient beings. They have opinions. Some of them, Welsh Ds probably, have quite a lot more opinions on things than other horses. But we need to kind of bring them along with us. And what tends to happen, I think, particularly in a yard situation, is that we often find that we've got a limited amount of time down at the yard. We might have a limited financial setup. We might do things in a way that's very different to somebody else's way. And there are not rarely rights and wrongs. I mean, obviously horse welfare is very important, but for the most part, we're all kind of muddling along as best we can. But actually, quite a lot of horse people are quite opinionated. And it's quite difficult then to set up, I think, a dialogue because we're not open enough to each other's opinions to have a discussion. And what that tends to mean, particularly with the advent of social media and actually the mainstream media, where criticizing or passing comment on something has become commonplace, really. And we forget that actually that old adage of, if you can't say something kind, don't say anything at all, is by far the best way to live, really, because actually we can really cause not just offense, but we can cause genuine hurt. Because if you're criticizing somebody behind their back, particularly, you can't have a dialogue because that person might well actually be wanting some help, wanting some support. But if you're criticizing them or somebody is criticizing them, the natural human way is to just completely fold in on yourself. And so where a situation could have been actually really helpful for everybody and to bring everybody on to progress and become, be positive for everybody and the horse, we tend to find that people just go back into themselves and they tend to just give up, really, or they feel that they're ostracized or alone from the group. And that's really not what I'm about. So I tend to be very careful about preaching, apart from obviously I'm preaching now. But I tend to be very careful about preaching about what people should be doing with their horses. Oh, you should be doing this. Oh, you should be progressing faster. Why haven't you done this? I think you need to buy the most expensive saddle. You need to have this done and that done. What about this sort of food? My questions are literally, have you considered? Have you tried? Would you be open to? And I think that's really important, because I think if people feel that they can ask you for some help, actually it works both ways. If I'm out coaching and I can spot something and we come to an agreement about a way that we're going to try and it works out better with the horse and the rider, then maybe I'll store that away and I might use that for myself later on. So yeah, I think that sort of thing is really important. And plus, having been a teacher for 27 years now, bullying is increasingly difficult to deal with because social media, a lot of it is unseen, a lot of it is unrecorded, and also we have all this business about only ever recording our successes. So we post a picture on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is of us, plastered in rosettes or having a wonderful time. And I think it's really important to understand that there is nobody who is successful 100% of the time. And that is exactly why we have to have psychologists and people to help us, just like you, Jenni.
Yeah,
So,
and, absolutely brilliant. And I think that's covered so many areas of why the bigger picture is that support can very much be there, but also cannot, and also why yards just seem to be this rife place for this stuff going on. And it's weird, isn't it? Because, you know, most horse riders that are on yards are leisure riders. They are not professional. They do not have to make money from this. They do not have to perform. They do not have to sell horses on or do anything. They just need to enjoy themselves. And yet there's this breeding ground. And it's kind of prevalent in lots of sports, but obviously, you know, close to my heart and close to the people that are watching this and listening in, it is very rife in yards and in places like that, for exactly the reasons that you said, which is it would be so much easier if there was one way to do things, because we'd all just do it. There'd be far less disagreement. And also, it's not even that there's one way to do it. It's for that horse there's one way, but for that horse there's that way. And so it's not even that that's the right or wrong thing generally. It's different for each horse as well, you know. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, you said, I feel like there's two types of support. What would you say those two types of support are?
So I think there is the practical support. I mean, when I think of the team, I have my big horse. I no longer compete him, but he has been out competing with a younger girl who's done a fantastic job. But in order to get them to the start box on cross country day, they need a whole raft of people in their support team. They need a farrier, vet, even if you're lucky. I mean, when does this ever happen? But even if you're lucky and you only need the vet to do the vaccinations, you know, we're going to need somebody to make sure that the horses are fed. We have a fantastic feed merchant where we can always get the stuff that we need. I regularly am in touch with lots of my science buddies back from my university days. So we're gathering information, and in a sense, that's a support part of our support team too. I mean, just you name it, the chiropractor who fixes the horse's back, the chiropractor who does my back so that I can keep going, grooms, lorry drivers, the guy who does the lorry plating, everything. That is the practical support team. And actually, if the saddle fitters, everybody, and we all really realise, I think most of us, particularly on the leisure scene, if we can call it that, we often forget that those people are actually part of our support team. And we actually sometimes make their jobs harder than they need to be, because we don't set up the dialogue with them over the longer term. So obviously, when you first get a horse, you don't know the first thing about the horse. Probably you've ridden it when you've tried it. You might have gone with an instructor or a friend to have a look at it, and then you will have got a vet who you may not know, and I mean the vet personally, to vet them. And we forget that that is part of all the information that is going to allow us to make the most of the relationship and the performance with a horse. So for instance, you know, when you first get a new horse, or regularly, we have our horses' saddles checked twice a year. When they're coming into winter, when they're just about coming up for their rest time, they all get about 2 months off. And we let them just blob about and not do very much. We have some horses that are absolutely rubbish if you just lob them out in the field, because they just pretty much go into a depression, like, who's just ignoring me and sticking me out in this field, and I hate it, it's horrible, but it's somebody pay me some attention. Whereas the sort of more characterful ones, who are a bit more feral, quite like having their holiday out for 2 months, and they're quite glad to get rid of the humans for a bit and just chill. But But we need to take that information that we've gathered about the practical help. So making sure that we get the saddle fitter. And if I have somebody who comes to me for coaching, often they come to me because I can't do this. I can't make my horse do this. I'm really struggling with dressage. I'm really struggling with jumping something or other. I can never make the distance. I can't ride a good line down a line of fences. I really struggle with the cross country or what it is. And certainly the first session, and often a good part of subsequent sessions, is actually taken up by me just trying to pick apart what things they've actually addressed. When they last had the vet out, what was it for? When they had the saddle fitter out, what work have they been doing with the horse? At what sort of level were they at when they were at their peak performance, or whatever it is? So those practical things are things that I think are really important in your support team. So making sure that you've kind of got your practical list. I mean, to make a rowing analogy, you've got to have a boat that doesn't have a hole in it. You've got to have riggers. You've got to have a set of oars that fit. You've got to have the right kit to row in. You've got to have eaten the right meals to make sure that you've got the energy to actually perform, and you've got to have a coach who's going to go out and actually coach you to ensure that you're going to be better than you were yesterday, actually, not better as in world medal winning. And in that sense, that practical team, the practical support team, is no different really in the equestrian world than it is in any other sporting world. And it's actually that it's the same team that will allow you to enjoy your horse for hacking or anything else that you want to do, even if it's not competitive sport. But the other sort of support team is more difficult. First of all, it's really difficult to acquire. And secondly, it's difficult to acquire because we don't always recognise that sort of support team that we all need. So we need, humans need interaction with other people. We are social beings. Even somebody like me who's actually quite an introvert, I have to put apparently, according to all the things, the surveys that I've done, quite interesting, by the way, if you've got a chance to do them. But I put on my teacher persona, and I find it quite intellectually stimulating to do that sort of thing. But the kind of support network that means that when you get down to the yard, you know that you are comfortable in that environment. That's part of the support network. Good friends, good family, knowing where to go. It's that sort of intangible emotional support that allows us to be our best selves, really. Some of it is to do with confidence, so supporting somebody, and this, of course, is what teaching children at school is like. It's like saying to them, and my job as a teacher, my sort of day job as a teacher, is to be able to say to the children, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. That's my biggest son. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, even if you get it wrong, it's okay, because we want to develop that growth mindset. We want to be comfortable enough in ourselves so that somebody can say to us, be it friend, family, teacher, riding coach, whoever it is, one of our support team, and partly this is mental health actually as well, is that it's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to feel rubbish about something. It's okay to be disappointed in what's happened. It's okay to feel that you're hopeless at something. But what you need to do is to always feel that there is a way forward out of everything. I mean, that's particularly important during the pandemic, because I think a lot of people, first of all, have been stuck on their own. So they haven't had the social interaction that they would normally get as going to work, whatever it is, because they've been stuck in lockdown on their own. So it's very easy to get into the downward spiral of thinking that you're hopeless and you can't do it and you're on your own. So why would you think any different? Because nobody's there to tell you, to even give you a smile or to laugh at you when you get something wrong, or laugh with you, and buoy you up when things are really going badly. And I think that's been quite a challenge this year, particularly with my coaching. I've had a lot of people who've rung me up or got in contact with me because things have really not been going well and they're stuck. They're absolutely stuck at the bottom of the loop. They don't know where to go. They feel like they can't ride because they've maybe had time off, because they haven't been able to ride. Maybe during lockdown, they haven't been able to do anything, go to the yard because of lockdown or whatever. And then they start to worry about possibly what other people are going to think. They start to worry about whether their horse thinks they're not going to be able to ride properly. And that sort of mental and emotional and psychological support is actually really important. Weak support, or at worst, I don't know what the negative of support is, but negative support, really having a go at somebody, criticism, it can be so damaging for years, really. And it takes a lot of people a lot of time to get out of that. It takes one remark for somebody who's not in a great place. When we come out of lockdown, it takes one remark to put somebody completely off of going out and doing something that they've loved for years. And it can sometimes take months to get past that. And that's where I like to come in, really.
And so that's really great, because that beautifully just puts it into some clarification that there are two different types of support when we talk about support. So there is the practical, and then there is the kind of the emotional, mental side of it. And actually, I love that, because I think the years of horse riding, we've all been focused on the practical stuff. And definitely I've noticed, I mean, I've been doing this for 8 years now, that there is now more of an understanding and an openness and an acceptance to actually realise that emotional and mental is just as important. And more of an openness to talk about it. And, the things that I am now putting out there and developing, and Eden, the Equine Development and Empowerment Network, that's what it's all about. This is about, there is practical stuff in there, but it's not about how to keep horse. It's the practical of the emotional and mental support. Yeah. There's even the practical elements within the intangibles as well. So tell us some more then about how you see support really helping with performance, helping people really achieve what they want to achieve. So we've looked at the two types, and we've looked at how it can be negative, but what about how we can support each other and how we can actually nip some of these behaviours in the bud, because they're very difficult when you feel they're happening to you, or if you see it happening but you don't feel you can say anything or speak out, or when the person is in a position of power. So, it's not just the people on yard, sometimes it's the people in charge of the yard, running the yards, the coaches, and that as well, sort of behaviour going on. And sometimes it can be very hard to kind of feel like you can stick your head up and say something above the parapet, because you're going to get shot down. And I'm really passionate about saying to people, do you know what, we've got each other, you can do that, you will be fine, we've got you. It might mean you need to change coaches, move yards, do something different. It might mean that there will be some challenges and uncertainty stuff coming forward, but you don't have to accept it and feel like it's your fault. What would you say in terms of that kind of the effect?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that it's very difficult to repair. That sort of damage is actually really quite difficult, in part because somebody who is being, let's really make sure that we know what we're talking about. If we're talking about bullying of any level, it's very difficult for somebody who's been a persistent victim of bullying to get out of that. And often, as you say, it involves actually physically removing yourself from the situation. And particularly we see this with children at school. If there is, in fairness, there is, we deal with bullying all the time. Children need to learn that they can't bully in whatever form that it takes. And part of our role is to help them deal with it before it becomes really a traumatic experience for the victim. And those traumatic experiences are actually, thankfully, in a school situation or with young people, relatively rare. Because teachers are trained to do that sort of thing. Now, we don't have that framework very often at a yard. I mean, you touched on it just now when you were talking about the sort of scenario of different, the situation, if you like, could be created by any one of a number of protagonists, really. Yard managers, a shouty coach, whatever it is, or just people who just don't get on. And I think there is the best way to protect yourself from that sort of thing is not to become the sort of introverted kind of wallflower to kind of withdraw from the situation. It's not to become the really argumentative person who retaliates or in some horrible way, the terrible thing of sort of the social media kind of putting up a post about how awful something was. It's not to do that, but it is to find a set of people, a team who will support you in a way that will help you develop your resilience. Because if we develop resilience, we also develop confidence, and we also develop more knowledge, because sometimes knowing something about somebody explains a massive amount about why they're doing things. And if we can develop that resilience, we are then better able to cope with whatever gets thrown at us. So I think that's really important. And those people who can help you support, develop that support and develop that resilience, they could be anybody. They could be your coach. And that's why it's really important to find a coach that you really get on with. I'm really sanguine about the fact that not everybody would like to be coached by me. They might think that I'm not as serious as I actually am, because I'm always laughing and joking, and but that's an important thing. It's often a good idea to have somebody who can come in from outside, because somebody who comes in from outside often has a bit more clout, if you like. It's like they've been invited in on a professional level. So whatever that is, so whether it's somebody like you, Jenny, or a coach who comes in from outside, or even down to the level of, you could say, well, my coach says I ought to be doing this, is quite a good line to say. If somebody says, well, why are you doing that? You shouldn't be doing that. And you just quietly say, well, actually, I'm trying this because my coach said it would be a good idea if I tried that. Or, Jenny said I ought to be trying this. And I'd be grateful if you could just, support me while I give this a go, see if it works, or whatever it is. So I think that's quite important, building somebody from outside. But we also have to, we need our friends. We do need our friends. We need our friends. And it's quite a difficult balancing act, this, because often, particularly on horse yards, we all know what it's like. We go down to the yard. I mean, I managed to muck out my horses this morning in record time because I knew I was coming on a live. But generally speaking, do you know what? I get there after work and I think, I'll only be here for 40 minutes. It'll be fine. And it kind of morphs into 2 hours because I'm gossiping with somebody, chatting about whatever's happened that day. And I think it's quite difficult because often we do have groups of friends which can be perceived as cliques, and people get very threatened by that, especially if, as we have in the horse world, we have quite a lot of big personalities. Often horsey people are quite loud, and they like having a good time. And so if you're in a team and you've got your friends around you and you are having a good time, that can feel really crippling for somebody who isn't having a great time. And I think we need to be mindful that we need to look after everybody. Sounds a bit like I'm teaching my year 10s again in a pastoral lesson. But actually, we do need to be really mindful that we need to include. We need to just check. We're not necessarily include. Some people don't want to be included, but they'd like to not be excluded. So it's always worthwhile just checking in on them, check if they're okay. If they're sort of fussing about something, or the horse, they've got on, put one foot in the stirrup and the horse has pinged off away from the mounting block. You know, are you okay? Would you like me to come with you? Sometimes if they're really struggling, it can be as simple as offering to just walk down and be in the arena with them, so that they feel that they've got somebody there, kind of like a health and safety representative, but it's emotional and psychological health and safety support as much as, you know, well, don't worry, I'll mop up the blood if you fall off. And so that I think is really important. So friends, they don't have to be your best friends. And I think we need to be really careful about how we try and include. And I think the other thing is, and we talked about a little bit about this before the show, is that there need to be rules actually on yards. And because if you have rules, it's very easy to work within a framework. Actually, if you know which side of the line you're stepping on, it's much easier to deal with that. I think if you don't have rules, or shall we say rules are developing as time progresses and people don't really know what they are, it can become quite difficult, because basically people just don't know where they are. So they don't know whether they're getting wrong. You get half the people who are really concerned about getting it wrong and have a real conscience about it in a terrible state most of the time, because they don't know whether they've broken the rules. And then you get the other half of the people who are really becoming really quite angry because they feel like they're being blamed for everything, and you know, they don't care whether they break the rules or not, or whatever they are. And people start to become quite unreasonable, because they feel like they've got their back against the wall. If you have a set of rules, this is how we're going to behave. And actually nowadays, I wonder if it would be a good idea if, when you pin up a set of yard rules, it should also include things that we possibly haven't done until now. So things like, we should be taking care to avoid bullying at all costs. And there are plenty of really good programs that you can use the hashtag for, or bring into Not on My Yard is a really good one. Black Hill Eventing has a really good one where they're buddying up. Jake Tarrant has a marvellous one, Buddy Don't Bully, all those sorts of things. I wonder if those sorts of things should be something that we also put on the bottom of our yard rules, just to remind people that it's not always about putting the mucking out tools away in the right place and keeping everybody physically safe, but it's also about providing a really good space for everybody to be able to enjoy their horses and each other's company, actually.
Yeah, and I think you're entirely right on that. That is so true, that if we think about most yards, I think it's changing slightly now, but most yards, yard managers, yard owners have developed a love for horses, been around horses, worked with horses, maybe been grooms, maybe been riders. They have not ever been taught leadership or management skills. And then suddenly they're trying to manage a group of people that involves two different types of people, because you've got the client-customer relationship of the people with the horses that are looking after them and paying for them to be looked after, or paying for the facilities or whatever. And then you've got the staff element of it as well. And we all know how difficult it is to manage staff, even without those kind of environments. I mean, God, the stuff I saw in the corporate world. And the interesting thing is that a lot of this stuff also does go on in the corporate world. I think it's just because they're pulling together to hit a common aim, which is the shareholders, you know, for them to be happy, to be profitable, to actually achieve things. They have to work through these differences. But actually on yards, there is not one common goal. There is not one common goal, apart from ultimately, yes, the care of the horse, but actually one person behaving one way and one person behaving another, if that's not affecting the care of the horse, the common goal of harmony or the common goal of fun or friendship or anything like that, it's not inherently there. And to expect these people who have never had these kind of roles, never run businesses, or maybe they have, but it's very difficult. And I have to say, the yards that I have been the happiest on, and personally the way that I like them to be, is the yards where actually the person running it has had some kind of leadership experience at some point in time, whether that be corporate, whether that be even sport team type things, like you say yourself, rowing or something like that, where they had to pull together with a common goal, because they really understand that actually they lead from the front, and their behaviour affects it as well, because it's all very well putting yard rules up, but if the person at the front is exhibiting the wrong behaviours, so they're the ones doing the bitching, the backstabbing, the gossiping, the talking about each other, the being between the two groups, because they are between the two. It's a rock and a hard place. It's not an easy job. By God, I'd never want to manage a yard. Thank you very much. The fact that if they are not showing those behaviours, leadership breeds culture. We know this in the corporate world, in the executives, and they get this training. These guys don't, and they are just trying to do their best in a very difficult environment that, quite frankly, is mostly women too.
Absolutely.
That in the mix.
Yes, exactly. And I think your point about what in the teaching world we call modelling, so modelling behaviour standards, and modelling that sort of, actually we all have a duty to the pastoral care of others, whether or not we like them, whether or not we spend a huge amount of time with them. We all have a duty to the pastoral care of others to make sure that we leave that person in a better place than we met them in. And I think we've lost that a bit. And I think I really do. I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. And I think the other thing is that it must be incredibly difficult on a yard where maybe you've got a yard manager who is trying to manage people who've got different horse goals. I mean, the guy who wants to go out and just hack about, and make sure his horse is still alive when he gets there in the morning, is a world away from the person who wants to go out and do Grand Prix dressage and doesn't want their horse to be turned out because they're worried that they're going to get injured, but wants the horse to be, really looked after. It takes more time. How do you balance that? I mean, it's extraordinarily difficult, and you have to balance the people. And I think I once went to a yard where somebody, the yard owner, it essentially interviewed people who were going to come to the yard. And I thought that was really fascinating. And actually the yard worked very well. We moved away in the end because we moved out of the area. But it ticked over very nicely because they had a really good understanding of what their owners were going to be doing. And also it really helped with just the basic mechanics, the practicalities of roughly how much time do we think they're going to be using the arenas when somebody else can't.
Absolutely. And I've had that same experience myself, and actually it was a very positive one, which is that when you go to look at the yard, although you think that you're looking around to see the facilities, you're looking around to see if it would work for you and your horse, you're not. They are assessing whether you as a person will fit within that yard, because it's so easy to have someone that doesn't fit within that yard. And the rotten apple syndrome, it spreads very fast. The rotten fruit spreads quickly through the bowl, and having to quickly remove that is not always a nice thing, but sometimes a necessary thing to do. So if you can prevent that in the first place as much as you possibly can, great. And I've had that same experience. And in fact, on that particular yard that I was on, it worked very well because, the yard manager, I don't envy her role. She said, you always have, please come to me with problems, not each other, because it stops the me going on in the yard. And especially if you then go to the staff and whinge about stuff who feel, well, I'm just trying to do a job, blah, 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 what's going on and all these things. If you all go to the yard manager, as much as it means that you don't know what's going on some of the times, and that's very difficult for a lot of people, at least there's a common point where, and they were very professional actually, they didn't bitch about other liveries to other liveries or to staff or anything like that. There was none of that. And actually that meant that, although unfortunately the reason many of us left in the end of that particular yard was because the facilities themselves needed managing differently. So weirdly enough, we left because the care of the horse wasn't right. But what they did have was the care of the human. And it's like, oh, God, where are we going to find a yard where it works both ways? You know, I've been on other yards where the care of the horse is impeccable, but the human and the emotional support isn't there. And it's like, oh God, you know, how do you find these two? And I completely agree with you that actually there are things that can be done that perhaps we just need to train people in this stuff. Perhaps we need to bring some of this stuff that you are talking about in schools, which makes perfect sense, that we are using in executive coaching and in executive leadership, and take it out into these people and say to them, look, there's nothing, it's not that you're doing it wrong, it's just that you could do it better if you had these skill sets, and maybe it needs to be included in the curriculum when we're looking at, you know, what yard owners, yard managers, anyone running these teams, leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it would be absolute to me. I mean, you know, obviously I've got a PGCE and a degree, and I've been teaching for all these years, and I've done quite a lot of pastoral specialisms and a lot of coaching for both rowing and riding and all that sort of stuff. And yet I still couldn't do my British Horse Society stages because I can no longer ride. So I don't need to do stable management, to be honest. That's not what I'm coaching. But I do the obvious, but you know, that's not what my clients want me to do. They want me to watch them riding. And at the same time, where is, for somebody who would like to go into doing a horse management role, managing a yard, whatever, where is that leadership training? It'd be amazing, absolutely amazing, if somebody could produce a course, an accessible course that people could do, you know, maybe to deal with, I'm sure they do on some of the NVQ or the vocational courses, I'm sure they do some of the sort of bookkeeping aspects of it. But maybe we should be doing, if you're looking at doing some sort of equestrian management, then we should be talking not just about accounting and actually managing the husbandry of the horses, but also managing people, and, you know, being a leader. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I know the knowledge that I've got of some of the courses that people go on, there definitely is elements of business in itself in that respect. There probably is a module here and there about leadership, maybe, but what there isn't, and also they tend to be for the younger people that are in college or uni or something like that at the beginning of their career. But what there doesn't seem to be available, easily and accessibly available at the moment, is for people further down the line that have now found themselves in leadership roles, who are now struggling to be able to do that for whatever reason. And, you know, I mean, I know people that have taken on a yard for them and their horses, and then obviously wanted to share it and what have you. But they found themselves in a yard manager role. And actually, they just rented the yard. Like that's not really where they ended up being. But they've now got to look after these people that they weren't expecting. And I've seen this happen lots and lots, actually. And in fact, at one point it was the same for me. But you know, so actually saying there's something here for you when you're at that point, because we never stop learning. And to be fair, this is the same in corporate. I remember having this same conversation because, of course, I was in talent management. And we had leadership development programs, and then we had what we called individual contributor programs, and they were for the techie guys and girls, but they were for the experts in their field, rather than the leaders of people. And often they would be really good at the job and get promoted into a leadership role just because of the way that it worked. And then the set of skills that they'd need to be using were totally different to what actually they're really good at, which was I was in technology, I was in tech. So, you know, that was programming or research and development or, you know, understanding testing or things like that. And then suddenly they've got to manage people and they're like, whoa, that's a whole other skill set. But what we had available for them was leadership training for them, because we recognise that. And I feel like that's a bit that's missing.
I think that would be amazing. I think it would be much more comfortable for a lot of people on yards as well to feel that I think the expectation that it would create was that you know, people expected the yard to be managed in a sort of people-focused manner as well as the horse-focused manner, I think that would be amazing, because I think that would be the potential to stop the sort of cliqueiness or the bitching or whatever it is, simply because you were running the yard in that sort of way. I think would be amazing. I think your friend who had all the people only reporting to the yard manager, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I think that really helped. I think a lot of people are trying, they're just trying to turn up, and it's December and we've barely got about 5 minutes of daylight, and even then it's pouring with rain, and you're struggling getting 3 horses in across a road in the pouring rain. And just as you've clipped the first lead rope on, somebody says, "Oh, could you move your car?" And you're just like, "Oh God, I haven't got time to deal with this." And I think that's, where if you're have a really good set of practical rules, but I think also that you can be really supportive to each other if you knew that that's what the framework was going to be like. God, I think that was a brilliant idea. If we've done nothing else, Jenny, this morning, we've come up with a fab idea.
I'd say the Charlotte is going to be involved. Sorry. It's coming, and you're a part of it now.
Oh dear.
And so if we come back full circle to where we started, though, which is the fact that there's 2 elements of support. There's the practical and there's the emotional. How does that affect performance? And we're not talking about elite athlete performance, today. Yes, we know it does. Obviously, it's really important, but that stuff's addressed to a degree at that level. How does it affect performance to, you're unaffiliated or you're affiliated, what I call the professional amateurs, the guys who are amateur riders, but do it in a professional manner, i.e. do it to the best that they possibly can. They invest in everything they possibly can. They do the very best they can. They're learning, they're growing, they're developing, they're training, they're going for it, but it's not their profession. Yeah.
I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. That there are 2 things that I think that vastly improve performance. I mean, there's just without question. So setting aside the getting the right saddle, doing the right training program, improving your skill level, your technique level, practicing, and there's no shortcut to practicing actually. But I think the other thing, that the psychological support, I mean, I think it's confidence, not arrogance. It's mindfulness. It's knowing how you are going to react in a situation and being okay with that. And that comes from having the support from somebody saying to you, it's okay to feel really nervous. When you leave that start box, you are literally going to feel like you cannot move your legs and arms. And you're going to be okay with that. You're going to be fine. That's what your body does. And you're going to feel nervous, and you're going to feel possibly absolutely terrified, and you're going to feel tired, and some people can't even see properly, and then as soon as you get going down that course, you'll be okay. To allow people to be able to feel whatever they're feeling and support them to deal with those feelings, I think is incredibly important in improving performance. But I also think there's another thing where it's really important, and that's this mindfulness business. And that is, so we're not just talking about being able to deal with the feelings of confidence and nervousness and excitement and determination and let's just say also negatively, but being able to deal with being aggressive or angry if you don't perform well or whatever all those other things are. I think the other thing that I would talk about, and this is incredibly important, it's about 70% of the psychological, the sort of mental well-being thing, is this mindfulness. It's being confident enough and comfortable enough in your own self that you can allow that horse to speak to you in the way that they can. And we all know they can't speak. And you need to be quiet in your mind, and you need to be confident enough that what you're doing yourself is not going to be causing them to do something that's unhelpful. So you need to be able to get on your horse in the morning and be able to say, right, it's not a good day. I was going to do dressage flat work practice this morning, but actually he's not in a good place. We're going to do something else. We're going to go for a little womble round the farm or whatever it is. Or actually, he's really up for it. I'll try not to contain all this energy in a sort of really, kind of confined mental space by making him do that really difficult dressage. We're just going to have a blast around the cross-country field or whatever it is. And I think that a lot of my coaching is designed to allow people, because I can see what they're doing and I can see how the horse is moving, but it's designed to allow people to start to feel how the horse is going for themselves. And so they can spot what may or may not be going wrong, spot when the horse is tense, spot when it's relaxed, spot when it's working properly, and they can progress. So I think that's two really good things. There's the performance psychology, going to go out and do it and nail it, and I'm going to deal with all these bizarre feelings on the way. But also there's that quiet, confident mindfulness that allows you to develop a really good relationship with your horse. So yeah.
Beautiful, awesome. And two key pillars of what I work with.
People
are always very surprised when I start talking about mindfulness, and I've got mindfulness recordings in Eden as part of the online learning and all these things, and people start going, but find it really difficult to find it really difficult to be mindful now. I find it really difficult to stop. My mind races away, and it's like, yes, that's why you need to do it, because if you can get into that place of listening to your horse and being in flow when you're on your horse, that will help you to perform better. And I completely 100% agree with you that there's so many pillars to this, and there are so many things that do affect performance, that if you have changed lots of things and you're still finding there's something else, and it's probably a mindset thing most of the time. Absolutely.
And I have people who come to me and who say, well, I haven't ridden for ages and I'm terrified about getting back on and I just don't know what he's going to do. And I'm like, well, okay, that's fine, we'll start in the stable.
That's exactly it. And I think this is a whole nother live in itself, but that's the skill of the coach, and the coach being flexible, and it's not about ego and it's not about proving things, it's about working with what you've got at that point in time. And also I love the fact that you said it's good, you're going to feel nervous. I mean, I say this to people, I say you're going to feel nervous, you're never actually in control of a horse, and they're like, what? How can you say that to me? I want to feel those things. It's like, well, because it's the case, like my magic wand's broken, I cannot stop you feeling nervous and anxious, because you're a human. It's gonna happen. But what you need to do is listen into it, which is another lie again. So thank you so much. I feel like that's a point that we can finish beautifully at before we open up another entire topic.
I'm going to go on for hours.
But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing some brilliant gems from I love talking to people that have got their feet in different pies is not the phrase. I think I've mixed it together there, but they're in different areas, so it's not all about one thing, one place, one vision. They've got those different perspectives, because we can bring in great learning from other elements of life, and share them and work brilliantly to create something that helps everyone. So thank you so much for sharing it all. If people want to get hold of you, if they think, I need to know more from her, I want to understand more, or they want to maybe work with you, how can they do that?
Well, the quickest way is to hop on to the Stable Manager page on Facebook. It's got my phone number on and email address, but actually I have my phone with me all the time. So unless I'm actually coaching or riding, I can usually manage to reply to a message. So yeah, that's the best way. Have a look and see what we do.
Super. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I do think we could discuss things for hours. We may have you back on for another one at some point in next year.
Lovely.
Thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure, and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you, and happy Christmas.
And you.